Hello, everyone, and thank you for sticking with us to this final day of build. Over the next 30 minutes or so, we're going to show you some live demos and talk about our next generation customer identity and access management offering, or CIAM offering, called Microsoft Entra External ID. This is going to enable you to create secure and scalable apps for your customers, suppliers, vendors, and all those external identities. My name is Pawan Nrisimha, and I'm a product manager on the External Identities team, responsible for the core platform and monetization.
Hi there, and I'm Steven. I'll be showing you some of the code behind what you see today. Welcome all of your questions. We have a good crowd here today, and really looking forward to that, so make sure you submit your questions. We'll have lots of time to discuss. So before we get started, I'd like to know how many of you are familiar with or have used Azure AD, which is our identity and access management. OK, that's pretty much everybody here. How about Azure AD B2C? Oh, fantastic. So this crowd knows about all this stuff. So first of all, thank you for your time and efforts to learn our product. Azure AD B2C works brilliantly, as you know, for some of the customer scenarios. And we've been growing at double or even triple-digit year-over-year growth rates over the past few years. Hundreds of millions of stored users, and you guys, all customers, love it because it's affordable. Now, having said this, there are a few quirks and pain points. Let's take developer experiences, for instance. Not so ideal set of APIs or SDKs. We fall short of a little bit on the CI/CD capabilities. And generally, your feedback has been that it's hard to boot or learn and get to production fast. And then there is this disparity in capabilities that you see here. So there is Azure AD on your left, and then Azure AD B2C on your right. Azure AD does really well for governance and control, kind of authorization, and it's got a good control mechanism. While Azure AD B2C, it's obviously customer-facing, so it's really good at customization. And this causes confusion when you have this disparity because they are on two separate feature stacks. And we've been thinking through these pain points and kind of ideating on how to bring the best of both the worlds onto one platform. So bring all the goodness that Azure AD B2C has and put it in Azure AD, and give you all that goodness of both, and at the same time also light up some of the new scenarios. So without talking too much more, let's get into a demo of a scenario which you cannot today accomplish on Azure AD B2C, but in this converged external ID offering, you should be able to do it. So a little bit of context to the demo. How many of you here are have e-commerce or in the retail space? OK, a few of you. Although we do serve all the other segments, financial, healthcare, government. It's just for illustration, I've picked Woodgrove Grocery, which is a global online e-commerce retailer. And there are several suppliers who come and list their products and manage their orders on this website. Contoso is one such supplier, and they have employees who come in and log into that application. And each of them needs to have separate authorization, or each of them has their own role. One could be an orders manager. Another one could be a product manager in the sense of listing or delisting their products. And I'm going to introduce this concept of groups and application roles for those of you who are not familiar. So there's a little bit of difference between the two, but for today's purpose, let's assume both give you a way to authorize users given a certain set of privileges. So the way that happens is when a user signs in, their role membership or their application or their group membership is sent in the claims of the token. So the application can kind of detect that and perform actions and give them the necessary authorization and capabilities that they should be having in the application. So with that, demo, please. OK, so this is the Woodgrove Groceries website, and then regular products on there. Now I'm going to try to sign in as a Contoso supplier, right? So you see that the screen here, you can customize it. You have the Woodgrove logo. The background image is all customized. So whatever the needs of your application are, we allow you to do all that customization. And then I'm a Contoso supplier, one of the employees. And I'm trying to, oops. OK, so you can sign in using a local account, or here's an example of capability to sign in with a social ID as well, Google in this case. So I want to show off how we use the social ID. So let's go to sign in with Google. What this does is redirects me to the Google Gmail sign in. And then it asks me for my display name. So again, these are all custom attributes that you could add to your sign-in, sign-up flows. So I'm going to quickly enter some of these. And in a bit, you'll also see you could also have hooks here where if I enter a wrong city or something of that sort, you could actually detect that and say, hey, Berlin is not in United States or something like that. So you could do all those cool things. You get to customize. I'm a vegetarian, so I do that. And then I click next. And there you go. I'm signed in. And here, I'm a regular retail user now, right? So I come in. Nobody knows that I'm a Contoso supplier. I've just signed up for it. And I can go check out and do all the things I can. Now comes the interesting part. So after having done this, how do I get my roles and groups, right? So let me go to this profile. And just for the purposes of this demo, kind of said, OK, there's a security group, and there are 2 application roles that we've created. And I can self-service sign up, and our friendly admin at the back end is going to approve me and make me part of those app roles or groups. So there is a security group called commercial accounts. And then there are 2 application roles. One is the product contributor. This is the person who can list and delist products. And then the orders manager, who can manage all the orders coming into Contoso. So I update app roles and security groups. And then it's successful. I need to sign out and sign back in to make these effective. And what's happening when I sign in is, hopefully in this few seconds, my admin, the friendly admin, has given me access to the app roles and groups. So what's going to happen when I sign back in is my membership information is going to be sent in the claims of the token. So let me sign in with Google. Yep. So it goes in. And let's see what's happening. What's the change here? What am I authorized? So the application detected that I'm part of this security group and 2 application roles. And then in a bit, we'll show you what happens in the code as well. This is the end user experience that we are seeing right now. So first thing, because I'm part of the security group, I'm getting a discount. I'm this special supplier, so I get a discount on some of the items. And then because I'm part of the orders application role, I have this lit up here, and then I can see all the online orders that are coming to Contoso. And there's another application role called managing products. This is where I can go and delete or list new products. So this is the end user experience aspect of it and how groups and app roles helps there. Let's take a quick peek. So there are 3 elements to this, right? So what we've seen is end user. Then there's the admin experience, where the admin back there has approved this user to be part of this group or app role. And then there's a developer experience on how the code should be handled, and that Stephen is going to show in a bit. So let's quickly look at the admin experience. So this is the Entra admin dashboard, the all new. So this is in public preview as of yesterday. So there are 2 things. So let's go to groups first. So we are in all groups here. And then you see the commercial accounts group that we just added ourselves to, or I added myself to as the Contoso supplier. And then if I see the members under this group, there you go, Pawan, I'm here. So I've been added to this group, and hence all that happens, all the stuff that I see on the front end of the app. And then similarly, if I were to show you how the application roles work, so go into application. So the salient difference between a group and application role is group is at the tenant level, it's sticky to the tenant, and app role is sticky to the application. Okay? And so I go into the Woodgrove app registration, and then get into the service principal of the application to be able to see the members of individual app roles. Go to overview here. There you go. So there I am. So I have, Pawan has a product contributor role, app role, and an orders manager app role. So again, so these have been added, and hence I can see it. So this is just a quick overview of how this can be handled. And Stephen is going to show you the application code part of it and how this is handled. Stephen.
OK, so let's take a look at how this works behind the scenes. So if I go back to the web app here, I'm going to go to a profile page. And you'll see on this profile page that we list out the properties for the user. So at the beginning there, we heard that everybody here has used Azure AD or an identity system before. These are the claims for the user, so it should be pretty familiar to you. Before we go and look at the code, I want to make a couple comments here. So when a user has signed in, you'll get all of these claims. And the claims are what you're going to use to personalize the application to the user and allow access to things like sensitive operations, maybe seeing the order status or changing user data. And the thing you want to keep in mind is that there are certain claims that you should or you should not use for these kind of authorization decisions. So we've seen that people are very tempted to use things like an email address or a username. And that is not good practice for authorization decisions, because that information can be input by the user, it may not be verified, and it could also change. You can imagine changing an email address on an account. So be very careful, don't use things like that. Use either the static object ID for the particular user when you're indexing or accessing data, or as Pawan just described, use the groups or the roles claims. So let's take a closer look at how these groups and roles claims can be used in your app. OK, so what we're going to do is take a look at the actual code behind this web app. And the first thing I'll draw your attention to is that if you have been doing development with the Microsoft Identity platform before, this will look very familiar. You'll have an appsettings.json file. So we did a demo yesterday in the last keynote of the day that was a getting started experience with this new unified tenant. And in that, you would generate an app registration, and you'd copy that information into the app. And so you can see the configuration here. The thing I'll draw your attention to is that we are operating on a new authority here for the unified platform. But otherwise, the values would be what you'd expect before. And right now, this app just has placeholders. It gets actually filled in at deployment time. You can imagine having like a staging or a development environment versus production. OK, so that's the configuration. And then the thing I'll draw your attention to next is the setup of the application itself. Now, the thing to keep in mind here is that you're able to use all of the Microsoft Authentication libraries that you may be familiar with to make requests to the new customer-oriented platform. And so if you've used things like Microsoft Identity.web for .NET, this will look very familiar. You can see that this library helps you pull in the configuration and then set up the application's authentication settings so that when a user goes to sign in, it will handle all of the standards-based flows. You don't have to worry about OAuth or the details of how that works. I will in particular draw your attention to the fact that we are specifically identifying which claim contains the roles. So you'll see that in just a minute. So that's the setup. And the main takeaway here is that if you have invested your time and effort into learning how to use the Microsoft Authentication libraries and identity platform, there's nothing new here. You can reuse all of that knowledge. And then the application code itself. So let's take a look at, say, the home page here and how we personalize it to the user. So on the home page, you'll see that there's a couple of properties that we are using to identify whether the user has the ability to access and manage products, that type of thing. And the interesting part is how we set those values. So I mentioned earlier that we're going to use the claims. So in .NET, we have a nice convenience function here, is in role. So that makes it really easy to check for a particular role. But you can do this in any language. You would take the response from the sign-in. That would be a token. Validate the token, make sure it's intended for your app. Use a library. That'll check all of the expiration and signature and whatnot. But you want to do an exact string match on the claim name, so roles, and an exact string match on the value you're expecting. So don't use contains or start withs. That's often a source of bugs or security vulnerabilities. OK, so once you've done that, you'll be able to set values like has the ability to manage products. And if we take a look at the page itself, you'll see how it all comes together. I'll just find has the ability to manage products. And you can see then that this conditional adds a button that allows you to manage the products. So that's what Pawan was showing there in the UI. So that's how it all works behind the scenes. So make note of your questions here, and we'll go into some more detail about the other things you can do in a moment. But I'll hand it back to Pawan for now.
So what you've seen here is one of the gaps that we've filled for public preview, right? But I wanted to paint a vision, in the future, the capabilities, the things that are possible because of this convergence, because of Entra External ID. So bringing what's good in Azure AD, so the resilience, the availability, the scale, all of that you're getting, and authorization, governance, you're getting all of that. But moving forward, developer experience is going to be significantly upped. And what do I mean by developer experience? It's not just about APIs and SDKs. It's also to meet you where you are. So for instance, we're going to abstract out identity and make it easy for you in your Visual Studio frameworks. If you're using Azure App Services, again, we are going to be there. And our goal is to abstract identity completely so you don't need to understand any of those constructs. And moving forward in this hybrid world, you also need to collaborate. So there are new collaboration scenarios that are lighting up between customers and employees. Imagine a retail bank's loan officer who wants to share loan documents with a customer on SharePoint Online, have them e-sign this. So this is all a new kind of phenomenon that's rooting out now. So such collaboration scenarios are also going to be lit up moving forward. And verifiable credentials, if some of you have attended Levent and Collins' kickoff yesterday, you probably saw the demo of verifiable credentials. Essentially, it's our way into passwordless and making sure that identity proofing and all of that is done in the background, and sign up is super easy and friction-free. Again, so these are all not yet available, but that's where we are headed, looking into the future and giving you all those capabilities. And now Stephen is going to dive a little bit into the developer experience.
OK, so for a bit more detail on what you get as a developer here, I think one of the nice things about building on the Microsoft platform is that you get these nice integrations with all of the other developer tooling that we have. So for example, if you're building an app in Visual Studio, there's a getting started experience. You can build the app and incorporate identity from the get-go. Same thing on Azure. If you are using things like app services, there's built-in authentication capabilities. So there's some nice integrations out there, and there's lots more coming. We've heard about the other platforms and languages that are of interest. And the other thing that I'll call out here is that if you saw the demo yesterday afternoon, we have a new developer center. I believe I put the link up there, the aka.ms/siam/dev. You can check that out. It's live now. And there's a quick start and a wizard experience there for building one of these customer-oriented apps on the unified platform. You can try it out. And then, of course, we have all the same libraries and samples that we've always had for for Python and Node and JavaScript, all the languages that you could possibly need. We've got examples and support for you. OK, so that's all kind of good building blocks. But let's take a look at something specific to the new platform here. So if you've used Azure AD B2C, one of the things that developers and customers really liked about that was the degree of customizability, the ability to incorporate your own code and logic into how the authentication flows work. And so this new unified platform that brings B2C and AAD together has the same capability. This is actually live. We're working on pushing out all kinds of new events. So this is an event-based model where during the authentication flow, there are certain points where we add a hook. And at that point, you can make a call out to code that you write and run yourself. In particular, I'll note that this is an external API endpoint. It can be running on whatever infrastructure and whatever language framework that you prefer. There's no dependence on Microsoft infrastructure per se, but of course we'd like to make it run well on Azure. And then once you invoke your own code, there's an API contract. I'll show an example of that in a moment. And you return some data that then modifies how the authentication flow works. Like you could stop sign up if you detect bad activity. You could augment the token. That's the example we'll take a look at now. So we're going to swap over to the demo, and we'll take a look at how that extensibility works. I forgot to mention that this is actually a live site. So if you want to bring it up on your phone or your laptop, you can try out the wggdemo.net and see the user experience yourself. OK, so let's go back to the profile page here that had all of those claims that we were talking about earlier. And so we talked about some of the security identifiers that you can use to authorize the particular user. But I'm going to look at some of the others that you might be interested in for personalization. So for example, we have here a loyalty tier. Now, a loyalty tier, you've probably had this experience if you're staying at a hotel or something this week. If you're a frequent customer, you want to be recognized and maybe get some discounts, that type of thing. But the important piece of information here is that this is data that lives outside of the directory, outside of the identity system. So your loyalty info, is likely in your customer relationship management CRM system. And so how is it that you're able to get data from an external data source, get it into the token, into the claims at the sign-in point so that you don't have to make subsequent API calls for user information? So this is a very powerful, what we call extension point. And to see how it works, I'm going to go to the portal here. And you can find this under Enterprise Applications. So if you just start from the top there, go down to Enterprise Apps. And this is called Custom Authentication Extensions. So you can see here it is in preview. So this is brand new stuff, extensibility. This works with your existing Azure AD implementations as well as the new unified platform. And so I talked about this idea of having different events that happen during the authentication flow. So we only have one example here right now. This is the token issuance event. So this is after, say, a user has done all of their authentication and we're about to issue the token. You can intervene at that point. And we're going to add some additional claims to the token so that you can do further personalization and pull them out of an external data source. OK, so that's what's happening here. And we're going to add more events in the future. So things like during attribute collection at sign up, you can imagine there's a lot of points where you'd want to personalize and customize. OK, so what's happening behind the scene here when this event happens, the token issuance start event, is that we define the API endpoint that we're going to call. There's some authentication protection of that API endpoint. I'll talk about that in a moment. And then we list here the claims that we're expecting to come back and that we're going to augment the response with. So for a little bit more detail on that, I'll go into Enterprise Applications and just look at a particular app here. So this is the one that the web app is using. And if we go into the single sign-on properties there, you'll see that there is a claims mapping policy. So we associate this with the particular token issuance event, which we call a custom claims provider. And then we map the particular values, like the loyalty tier and whatnot, into the token. So that's how it works behind the scenes. So if you've done any work in the portal, that's probably going to look, that part will look familiar to you. Now, if we go over to the documentation next, so just search in your favorite search engine for a custom claims provider. You can see the API reference here. And so this is in particular for augmenting and adding claims at that token issuance event. And how the API works here is that you'll receive a request at your API endpoint that you are exposing. And that will contain all the information about the current authentication flow. So for example, you probably want to customize to the particular user who's going through the flow. So you need to look at that info. And then you're going to return the data in a particular format so that we know how to insert it into the token. And so there's going to be a data and there's actions here. The action is providing claims for a token. And you can see in the example there's a couple of different claims. So that's the interface that you need to implement. And so let's take a look at some code for that. So now we have a separate repository. This is the backend API, the API endpoint that's going to provide the external data or talk to a data store outside of Microsoft, for example. And it's the same sort of structure here. We're going to take a look, say, at the data first, the data model. And you can see there's other types of events that we're working on to show you soon. But you can see that in the response for the token issuance event, you're going to construct a data object, add the different action that I mentioned to, for example, provide claims for the token, and then actually set the values. And so let's take a look at the implementation of this. So the API endpoint itself is here. And I'll start at the top. Actually, I should get this out of the way. OK, so what we've got at the top there is the incoming request. And that incoming request has the information that we saw in the documentation. So this is things like the user info. So you take that and pull out whatever information you need in order to make decisions or determinations about what data to return for the active user, for example. And then you'll set the values of the claims in the response here. So you can see that we're not doing anything very sophisticated. In this example, we're randomly generating a loyalty number and tier. So I hope I end up in the diamond top tier there. But you can use your imagination here, and this could be pulling data from your CRM system. It could be talking to a vendor who is implementing very sophisticated checks or identity proofing, that kind of thing. So this is a very powerful extensibility point. It totally opens you up to do whatever you need in your application. But that's the interface and the contract you need to implement. Before I move on, I do want to talk a little bit more about securing this endpoint. So this is going to be returning user data, like your loyalty information, right? So you need to make sure that this is only accessible by the appropriate callers. And there's a couple different ways to do this. We left some comments here in this example code. So for example, if you're running on app services in the Azure cloud, there is built-in authentication there. Some people call that easy auth. You can use that built-in authentication to validate the token. You'll need to check the AZP claim. Depending on which token version, this indicates who the caller is, and you need to make sure that that is, in fact, the Microsoft issuer of this token. There's other ways to do this. For example, you could put a gateway in there, like APIM, the API management from Azure, do the token validation there. Or you could just use the framework's built-in authorization capabilities. So we have an example of that as well for .NET. And I think if we're doing OK on time, I'll just show you the last of that, which is that when you do run the app, you'll want to do that important check that I mentioned. So this is the setup using Microsoft Identity Web. I alluded to similar for the web app earlier. And when you do build the app, you need to make sure that you check who the caller is. So that's really critical here. The theme of this talk is securing, making sure that you're building secure applications. And so secure both your backend APIs as well as your web frontend. So yeah, there's more in the docs. Just do a search for custom extension, authentication extensions, and the custom claim provider to learn more. I think that's probably good for the demo now. I'll hand it back to Pawan, and then we can take some of your questions.
So just to recap what we've done today, we've introduced you to a new public preview of Entra External ID. You've seen a demo of how to use groups and app roles. That's a new capability that's been lighted up with this public preview. And then Stephen walked you through the custom extensions and the possibilities there. And in terms of moving forward in our vision, we kind of explained some of the scenarios using SharePoint Online or keeping you in context in Visual Studio or GitHub, Azure App Services, and so on, so you don't need to go back and forth to insert your identity needs. And the fact that we can, as Microsoft, can control the end-to-end experiences through all these properties, and also being one of the only or the only cloud service provider out there having such an identity solution, we also have control over the fundamental platform and the availability and the scale. We are looking forward to providing and serving all of your needs, and at a cost that's super reasonable for you. So some homework for you. Last day of build, and this is probably going to be take the most
or the least amount of time for you to get this done, go try our 5 minutes to wow experience, aka.ms/ciam/dev. See how easy it is, create a tenant, spin up an app, set up basic sign in, sign up, and see how it goes. And then go talk to your friends and colleagues, and we look forward to hearing your feedback. Thank you so much. And we can take Q&A now.
Yeah, so we got 15 minutes for questions, and I think there may be some online submissions, and then it'll be more difficult to do the ones in person. So maybe try putting it into the app here, and then we'll see if we can get it promoted up. OK. Let's see here. So do you want to read the question?
Yeah, I'll take the first question. Are there limits to how many external accounts can be managed? No. So for all your needs, so we are going to make sure that your needs are met. And that's why when I say scale, so I don't want to put a certain number. So far with Azure Active Directory B2C, there hasn't been a customer whom we haven't been able to serve. And we hope to continue that moving forward. But if you have specific questions, happy to meet offline and talk about it. What is the pricing model? We'll keep you informed about it. Usually at public preview, it's still free until we go general availability. And we'll keep all the existing Azure AD B2C customers informed about any specific pricing changes or anything. But as of now, it's status quo. Just stay tuned.
OK. How do we move the question to the next one?
So there's a question from the audience. The best way for you to ask questions is through the app, because there are people online, I think, that can't hear you otherwise.
Should we take one live question while we get the
questions? But you can ask maybe, and then I'll.
How we add external user to the Entra, to this solution? Just manually entering email or just a sign-up process?
OK, so the question is, how do we add external users to this Entra product? Is it by manually entering, or is it through a sign-up process? So consider the Woodgrove application I showed you. So an external user can sign in, sign up using a local account, or a Google or a Facebook or whatever the social ID that you want to use. Or they could be federated from another Azure AD tenant. So there are multiple ways they can sign up. And when they sign up, they get added to the directory, and they're part of that Entra External Identities directory. So there's another question here. Azure AD B2C has user flows and the identity experience framework. Creating your own customer user flows using the identity experience framework is rough because we have to edit XML. How can we create customer user flows in Microsoft Entra? Great question. So if you recall, one of the pain points we've heard is it's hard to boot on Azure AD B2C. The time to production is large, steep learning curve. That's because of XML. So we're getting rid of that. There's no more XML. It's only user flows. It's click button. And so there's the same concept of user flows in Entra External ID today. So if you go in and try it out. So it's as simple as that. And then we're going to develop on that and make sure you have all those bells and whistles to kind of customize your experiences. I'm super excited. We're not going to stop there. Super excited about some of the low-code, no-code stuff that are going to come to make it much more easier for you. But again, I don't want to say things that are not yet there, but they'll be there very soon. Question, are there built-in security controls for things like credential stuffing or adaptive MFA? Yes. So when you talk about adaptive MFA, that's our identity protection conditional access offering. Again, it's now available in public preview. So it's risk-based and based on user risk. And there's a bunch of risk signals, or not bunch, hundreds or even thousands of risk signals that go into calculating that. And then an MFA is triggered if the risk score is high. And you can actually customize that as well. So the short answer is yes.
Yeah, and I'll call out that that's part of the beauty of the unified platform is that all the investments that we make in security to the core Azure AD product are now available, whether it's an external user or not.
Will there be a migration for B2C customers? Absolutely. One of our principles is leave no customer behind. We are not going to abandon any of you. Right now, we still don't have a migration path, but we'll keep you informed. It'll be a phased migration path, from the simple to the complex use cases that you have, but stay tuned. Date of general availability for Microsoft Entra. My bosses will kill me if I put a date here, but I'd say it's in a reasonable time frame. You will be excited. So start getting into public preview, and have confidence that you can quickly go to prod on the generally available product. These are exciting times. What's the difference between Entra External ID and the previous? Sorry, that question skipped. We are a SaaS company with customers requiring full branding. Will there be support for custom branding per customer? Oh, yes, absolutely. And we have our branding PM right here who is probably bubbling up inside and saying, yes, 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 yes. Yes, you will have the full branding capabilities, and we are aware of all the requirements from Azure AD B2C customers. Does the solution support multi-tenant scenarios? For example, can external identity providers be configured per tenant for federation? Absolutely. So this is one of the other capabilities. So there are two ways to do this, right? So when you have customers from other Azure AD tenants who want to sign in, there's a concept called home realm discovery. So when the domain name gets entered, they get routed to that tenant, you sign in there, and then the token comes back here. Yes, that's possible. Another way is to go through B2B collaboration settings where you kind of allow list only certain tenants. This is typical of multi-tenant organizations. And you allow list certain domains and certain tenants. And then you're able to push them there, sign in, sign up there, and get the token back and accept it. So yes, absolutely. That is possible. What's the difference between Entra External ID and the oh, got it. This is still the same old question. Can we scroll up, please?
Well, I think the question here is difference between Entra External ID and the existing B2B collaboration. Yeah.
OK. So there is the thing that we've done is, so Azure AD and Azure AD B2B are on this platform, and Azure AD B2C was here. So now we are merging them. That's a convergence. So it's one now. So there's no difference. So we are getting all the goodness of everything that's on this platform and adding this. So Azure AD B2B stays as is. Whatever capabilities you're using today will stay as is. Plus, you're going to get all the beautiful branding capabilities that Sasha, our product manager, is adding to that, and more. So do you expect orgs to host all users in one unified tenant, or will they have a separate tenant for customers? Great, great question. So I've personally talked to at least 100+ customers on this before we went and designed the platform for this. 100% of you who wanted the customers to be in a separate tenant, right? Because of privacy and compliance reasons. Now, when somebody asks me, can we put them all in the same tenant, I kind of ask, what scenario are you trying to achieve? So from our perspective, we want to give you that compliance and security, so they're going to be in separate tenants, but we are not going to block on any of the scenarios that you need or want. So again, happy to sync up offline to understand your scenario, but I'm almost 100% sure that we'll be able to serve your scenarios wherever, between customer and employee or other collaboration scenarios.
OK, we don't have any more on the teleprompter. We can probably she's shaking her head at me. So if you are able to type it in.
How about this? Just repeat the question really clearly for our ASL friends.
OK, let's do that. Yeah. So yes.
So I actually did type it up. I don't know why it didn't scroll through. But a couple questions that are all related. What is the future of B2C? Did you abandon B2C? We invested $500,000 moving our e-commerce portal over to B2C, and it's like, oh, we're going to start over and we're going to stop improving on B2C. So it feels really frustrating. So I'm trying to understand, what is this relationship? What is the future? And are you just, like for example, I just want to call an API
Okay, I'll take that question. First of all, we are not abandoning B2C. I and a bunch of other product managers get paid through that.
Pawan, you'll have to repeat the question.
Oh, sorry. So the question is, what happens to B2C? Are we abandoning it? What happens to the customers who are on there and who've spent millions of dollars, invested in that? What's the future, and what thought process did we, as Microsoft, put into it before making this decision? So in response, we are not abandoning B2C. As I said, me as a PM and a bunch of other PMs and engineers, we all get paid from that thing. So we are still here, and we do, and we are not going to abandon it. The point is, as a principle, as I said, we are going to show you a migration path that's as seamless as possible to bring you onto this platform, because it really lights you up to all those additional scenarios, gets you away from custom policies and all the kind of the hard stuff. So that's the thought process. Yes, it's a little painful, as with any other service that you have to kind of take to a next generation thing and you start deprecating, but it's nowhere in the near future in terms of deprecation. It's supported. In fact, we are investing a lot in the resiliency. Recently, we've even launched public preview of data residency or Go locals in Japan on B2C. We've just launched private preview of on behalf of flows. Our product manager is there for that in B2C. So nothing is stopping on B2C until we find a path for you to come onto the converged Entra External ID platform. Okay. I think a related question, will there be a migration for B2C customers? Yes. Stay tuned for more. I wouldn't worry at all if you're an Azure AD B2C customer that we are abandoning it or we've stopped it and we are not going to support it. Please get that out of your minds. We are still here. We are 100% committed. 4 nines SLA, supportability, resiliency, and all of that continues until we show you a migration path and you're convinced you want to migrate. And we expect this to be a multi-year approach. Okay, this is not going to happen in the next few months. Can there be multiple on Entra tenants configured under one Azure tenant similar to B2C? We might have to talk a little bit about your specific scenario there. If you're thinking you want to separate your customers in different tenants and have them kind of collaborate or something of that sort, it should be possible. But again, I'd like to understand your scenario a little bit better to answer that question accurately. Can I customize login flow and login UI using JavaScript like Azure AD B2C? I'd love for our product manager to come and answer that, but the point is yes. So there are some elements that are available today in terms of the branding and customization, and a few fast follows that will come through the rest of the year in terms of having your CSS, HTML, JavaScript capabilities.
Yeah, so talk to Sasha about that one. And I'll also note that, as we alluded to in the talk yesterday, there is plans for native SDKs for your front-end apps. So if you do want to do full customization, especially on mobile, that would also be something to watch out for. OK, we got first applause for that one. All right, there's about a minute left. So do you want to try one more question here? And we'll stick around, and our contact info is on the screen there. So we're happy to keep chatting after.
How does this fit with upcoming plans for decentralized identity? So it's pretty much right now, it's integrated. So verifiable credentials is kind of our decentralized identity offering. And there was a demo yesterday, and there's more information in the documentation and blogs if you want. But we are doubling down on that. Is there geolocation capabilities? I'm assuming that refers to geolocation. Is that it could mean two things. One is,
so when you authenticate, you want to see where the multi-factor authentication,
yeah.
If the reception is in, you expect it to be Europe, but they're in Japan, that geolocation that will throw.
Absolutely. OK. So the question here, I mean, specifically about geolocation is during MFA, do we take that signal into account as to the location of that user and then signal the risk if there is? Yes. So geolocation is one of the signals we get based on IP and other things. And that goes into the calculation of the risk score for identity protection. And if it's higher risk, then you trigger an MFA.
And we can configure so that this
So the question is, can we configure that to kind of say which locations people are expected to be in and so on? It's going to be hard for you with millions of customers to do that, but there are some, I don't know the specifics of exactly, just to be very open, but yes, there are capabilities for you to kind of configure some settings. And I can kind of dig in with that with you if you can just send me an email after this.
Okay, so we're at time, and the stoplight has come on here, so thank you so much. Contact info is there, and we're going to stick around, so please do bring your questions. We got lots of experts.